everyone, I am Teresa, and I would like to thank you for attending today's training. I will be covering the Organizational Development Intervention of Scenario Planning at the organization level. This training will provide knowledge of what scenario planning is and how to assimilate it into your business. When executed properly, scenario planning will provide a well-worded answer to the question, what would happen if? The recommended methodology to use consists of 4 major activities, which we will discuss in depth later on in the presentation. The purpose of scenario planning is to help inform decision-making, learn through challenging the currently held mental models, enable organizational learning, and enable organizational agility. Originally, scenario planning was created as a management approach to prepare for the economic and oil demand of the mid-1970s by the Royal Dutch Shell. They used a process of defining and elaborating on various alternative scenarios, allowing them to predict an eventual oil crisis. Scenarios are detailed stories which help us to understand how the world and its changes would look in the future. By following this process, Royal Dutch Shell developed a planning technique that teaches managers to think about an uncertain future which would prevent the company from going under. They have continued to produce Shell scenarios since that have aided to anticipate the collapse of communist Europe in 1989, the surge in world energy demand, as well as the threat of climate change. With the never-ending change in economy and organizational demands, there is much uncertainty, allowing scenario planning to become increasingly popular. Single, predictable forecasts are next to impossible to create and/or for organizations to respond to. Scenario planning encourages organizations to consider several likely possible future states. Detailed stories are developed that describe plausible future circumstances for the organization to consider, which are most likely to occur. From there, the analysis team simplifies the avalanche of data into a limited number of possible states and develops plans and actions. To have productive scenario planning, organizations should require members to be committed and knowledgeable for team collaboration. The benefits of performing this particular OD intervention are great and outweigh weaknesses twofold. Following the process requires knowledge, dedication, creative thinking, and teamwork, which all great organizations should possess. Executing the intervention will take time to facilitate and manage, but it is well worth for your organizations to follow through. Developing narratives that describe plausible future circumstances is highly invaluable and beneficial to have prior to crises occurring. Now to put scenario planning into action by completing the 4 activities I mentioned previously. The first activity is titled Getting Started. Before any scenarios are written, a scenario planning team should be formed, usually somewhere around a dozen members who have executive support. The team must determine the time frame to be discussed and the focal topic of interest. The group should also agree on the process and outcomes of the effort. The second activity is laying the environmental analysis foundation. Group members gather quantitative data about facts and trends, as well as qualitative data about views of the future from organizational members. At this stage, the group explores external factors such as demographic trends, social and environmental patterns, as well as other economic, political, and technological concerns. Once these tasks are completed, the third activity is creating the scenarios. The factors discussed earlier are now analyzed and compared for their predictability and influence on the organization. 3 to 5 storylines or scenarios are written that capture the majority of the extreme future alternatives. A table compares the scenarios across several variables of concern. Good scenarios, according to Lindgren and Bandhold, have the following 7 characteristics. Decision-making power. The scenario provides enough detail that decisions can be made based on the scenario coming true. Plausibility. The scenario must be realistic and believable. Alternatives. The scenario should imply options and choices, each of which could be a likely future state. Consistency. The scenario should be consistent in its own story. Differentiation. Scenarios must be different enough from one another that they describe genuinely alternative situations. Ideally, they would be diametrically opposed. Memorability. Scenarios should be limited in number, and each should provide dramatic narrative for ease of recall. Challenge. The scenario should confront what the organization currently believes about future events. Finally, the fourth step in scenario planning is moving from the scenarios to a decision. The scenario planning group and the leadership team discuss implications of each scenario, including the opportunities and threats to the organization for each alternative. Current strategic decisions are tested and debated. The group makes decisions about the actions to take and agrees on metrics and processes for communicating and monitoring the actions. A current model of scenario planning put into place that is important now would be the COVID-19 pandemic. It has triggered a wide range of planning activities that aim to recover the enterprise from the pandemic in the mid-term and renew it in the long term. A range of Gartner research shows that especially during disrupted times, agile decision-making and strategy setting result in outsized performance and establish a lead over the competition that sustains long after the initial disruption. Strategic scenario planning facilitates agile strategy setting and provides a framework and process to examine possible futures.